After our father left us, my mother cheated on me and went to her new husband's family, leaving me for adoption. I was 8 when my father disappeared. One day he was there, yelling at my brother and me for spilling juice on the carpet, and the next he was gone. No note, no phone call, nothing. My mother didn't talk about it much, just said he probably ran off with some woman he met at the bar he liked to hang out at after work. I don't know if she was right or just guessing to fill the silence. My brother, Jake, was 10, and he took it harder than I did. He'd sit in Dad's old chair in the living room, staring at the front door like he expected him to walk back in. He never did. Back then, we lived in a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a leaky roof, and a kitchen that always smelled like burnt toast because the oven was busted. Dad worked at a factory, and Mom stayed home with us. Money was tight even when he was around, but after he left, it got worse. Bills started piling up on the kitchen table, unopened envelopes with red stamps screaming, "Past due." Mom would shove them into a drawer when she thought we weren't looking, but I saw. Jake probably did too, though he never said anything. She started working after that. First it was a part-time gig at the gas station down the street, then a second job waitressing at a diner a few miles away. She'd leave early in the morning and come back late, her uniform stained with grease and her face tired. Jake and I were left alone most of the time. We'd heat up cans of soup or make peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. I didn't mind too much, I was used to figuring things out on my own, but Jake hated it. He'd grumble about how Mom didn't care about us anymore, how she was too busy to even ask how our day went. I didn't argue with him. He wasn't wrong. The house got quieter without Dad's loud voice filling it. No more arguments between him and Mom, no more of his heavy footsteps stomping around. But it wasn't peaceful. It was empty. Mom stopped smiling, and Jake stopped talking to me as much. I tried to play video games with him like we used to, but he'd just shrug and say he wasn't in the mood. I didn't push it. I figured he'd come around eventually. He didn't. Things stayed like that for a couple of years. Mom working, us fending for ourselves, the house falling apart bit by bit. The roof leaked worse every rain, and we'd put buckets under the drips. The power got shut off once because Mom couldn't pay the bill on time, and we spent 3 days using candles until she scraped enough together to get it back on. I didn't realize it then, but looking back, that was when everything started shifting. Mom was drowning, and she was about to grab onto anything, or anyone, to pull herself out. By the time I was 10, Mom had been working herself ragged for 2 years straight. Her hands were rough from washing dishes at the diner, and her eyes had these dark circles that never went away. She didn't talk about Dad anymore, not even when Jake brought him up. It was like she'd erased him from her life, or at least tried to. But erasing him didn't fix the mess he left behind. The house payments were behind, and the bank kept sending letters threatening to take it. I found one crumpled in the trash once, but I didn't tell Mom I saw it. She was stressed enough. One night, she came home later than usual. Jake and I were on the couch watching some old cartoon reruns on the TV that barely worked. She walked in with this guy trailing behind her. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with a buzz cut and a leather jacket that smelled like cigarettes. His name was Rick. She introduced him as her friend from work, but the way she kept glancing at him made it clear he was more than that. Jake didn't say anything, just stared at the TV. I nodded at Rick because I didn't know what else to do. He didn't nod back. Rick started showing up more after that. He'd come over on weekends, sit in Dad's old chair, and crack open beers from a 6-pack he brought. Mom would sit next to him, laughing at his dumb jokes in a way she never laughed with us. It was weird seeing her like that, happy I guess, but not with us. Jake hated him right away. He'd mutter under his breath about how Rick was a loser, how he didn't belong here. I didn't like him either, but I didn't say it out loud. Mom seemed lighter with him around, and I figured if he made her less miserable, that was something. Then things got serious. One day, Mom sat us down at the kitchen table. Rick wasn't there, but his presence hung over the room anyway. She said she and Rick were getting married. Just like that, no warning, no discussion. Jake asked why, and she said Rick had a steady job at a warehouse and could take care of us. I didn't believe her. Rick didn't strike me as the taking care of people type. He barely looked at us when he was around, like we were furniture he had to step around. She didn't mention the house or the bills, but I knew that was part of it. Rick had money, or at least more than we did. Mom saw him as a way out. I couldn't blame her for wanting that. Life had been hard since Dad left, and she was tired. But what came next wasn't something I saw coming. Not then anyway. She was already planning the rest of it, and me and Jake weren't both part of that plan. After Mom dropped the news about marrying Rick, things moved fast. She started packing up stuff around the house, not just her clothes, but dishes, pictures, even the old coffee maker Dad used to swear by. It was like she was erasing every trace of our old life. Jake and I watched it happen, not sure what to say. I figured we'd all be moving in with Rick, maybe to his place across town. He had a house, Mom said once, bigger than ours with a garage and a backyard. I didn't care about the backyard, but I wondered what it'd be like to live somewhere that didn't leak. Then one afternoon, Mom called us into the living room. Rick was there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He didn't look happy, but he never really did. Mom sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous, which wasn't like her. She usually acted like she had everything under control, even when she didn't. Jake sat next to me on the floor, picking at a hole in his jeans. I could tell he was already pissed just from the way Rick was standing there. She started talking, slow at first. She said Rick had agreed to let her move in with him after the wedding. That part made sense. Married people live together. But then she said he wasn't big on kids. He didn't want a house full of them, didn't want the noise or the mess. I didn't get it at first. We weren't that loud, and we cleaned up after ourselves most of the time. Mom kept going, explaining how Rick was willing to take one of us with him. Just one. The other would have to go somewhere else. Jake's head snapped up at that. I just sat there, trying to process it. She was saying she had to pick between us, like we were extra baggage she couldn't fit in the car. Rick didn't say anything, just stared at the floor. I don't know if he felt bad or if he just didn't care. Mom said she thought about it a lot, and she decided Jake would go with her. He was older, she said, more responsible. He could help out around Rick's place, maybe even get along with him eventually. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why not me. I was too stunned to open my mouth. Jake didn't say anything either, but his hands balled into fists. Mom kept talking, saying she'd found a place for me, somewhere I'd be taken care of. She didn't say orphanage yet, but I figured it out later. That was it. She'd made her choice, and I wasn't part of her new life. A week after Mom told us her plan, she started getting me ready to leave. She didn't call it leaving, though. She kept saying I was going somewhere better, somewhere I'd have a chance to start fresh. I didn't know what that meant. Our house was falling apart, sure, but it was still home. Jake didn't talk to me much that week. He'd sit in his room with the doors shut, and I'd hear him kicking stuff sometimes. I think he was mad at Mom, maybe at me too, even though I didn't pick this. Mom packed a duffel bag for me. She put in some clothes, my toothbrush, a couple of books I liked. She didn't ask what I wanted to bring, she just decided. The bag sat by the front door for 2 days, like a reminder that I wasn't staying. Rick didn't help. He'd come over, glance at the bag, then go sit in the kitchen with Mom while they talked about wedding stuff. I heard them once, arguing about money. He didn't want to pay for anything extra, not even for me. That's when I realized he'd probably pushed her to do this. The day came fast. It was a Tuesday, gray and rainy. Mom drove me in her beat-up station wagon. Jake stayed home. Mom said he didn't need to come. The place was about an hour away, a big brick building with a sign out front that said, St. Mary's Children's Home. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a school, or maybe a hospital. Mom didn't say much on the drive. She kept the radio on low, some country station playing songs I didn't know. I stared out the window at the wet fields passing by. When we got there, she parked and turned off the engine. She didn't get out right away, just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Then she said she was sorry, that this was the best she could do. I didn't look at her. I didn't want to see her face. A woman in a gray sweater came out of the building, holding an umbrella. Mom handed her my bag, signed some papers on a clipboard, and that was it. She didn't hug me or say goodbye. She just got back in the car and drove off. I watched the taillights disappear in the rain, and then I was alone with the woman and my duffel bag. The woman in the gray sweater took me inside St. Mary's. Her name was Ms. Carter, and she was one of the staff. She didn't talk much, just showed me where to put my bag and pointed me to a room with 6 bunk beds. I got a bottom bunk near the window. The mattress was thin, and the blanket scratched my skin, but I didn't complain. The room already had 4 other boys in it, all around my age. They didn't say hi or ask who I was, they just kept playing cards on one of the beds. I sat on my bunk and stared at the wall. St. Mary's wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either. The food was bland, lots of oatmeal and canned vegetables. We had a schedule: breakfast at 7, classes in a room with old textbooks, then chores like sweeping floors or washing dishes. After that, we got a couple hours to ourselves before lights out at 9. I didn't make friends at first. The other kids had their own groups, and I didn't feel like talking anyway. I kept thinking about Mom and Jake, wondering what they were doing at Rick's place. I stayed there for years. Ms. Carter and the other staff didn't ask about my family, and I didn't tell them. I figured Mom had told them enough when she dropped me off. Sometimes I'd wonder if she'd come back for me, maybe after she and Rick settled in. She never did. No letters, no calls, nothing. Jake didn't reach out either. I didn't blame him. He was probably busy with his own life. Still, it stung knowing they'd moved on without me. School at St. Mary's was basic, but I paid attention. The teachers weren't great, but they gave us math worksheets and history books to read. I got decent at numbers, better than most of the other kids. One teacher, Mr. Evans, noticed. He was an older guy with glasses who taught us science. He'd give me extra problems to solve when I finished early. It wasn't much, but it made me feel like I wasn't just wasting time. I started thinking maybe I could do something with my life, even if I was stuck there. By the time I was 16, I'd settled into the routine. I had a couple guys I hung out with, Tom and Chris, both orphans like me. We'd sneak into the kitchen at night sometimes, grab extra bread rolls when the staff weren't looking. It wasn't a bad setup, all things considered. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. I had to figure out what came next. When I turned 18, St. Mary's didn't let me stay. That was the rule. Once you were an adult, you were on your own. Ms. Carter gave me a folder with some papers, my birth certificate, a social security card, and a letter saying I'd completed their basic education program. She also handed me $50 in cash and a bus ticket to the city. She said it was a start, wished me luck, and that was it. I packed my duffel bag, still the same one Mom gave me, just more worn out, and walked out the front door. The bus dropped me off downtown in a city I'd never been to before. It was loud and crowded, nothing like the quiet of St. Mary's or the small town I grew up in. I didn't have a plan, just the money in my pocket, and a vague idea of finding a job. I spent the first night in a cheap motel that smelled like mildew, counting out what I had left after the room fee. $23. I knew I'd need more fast. The next day, I started walking around, looking for help-wanted signs. I didn't have a resume or experience, but I figured someone had to need a pair of hands. I ended up at a diner, not much different from the one Mom used to work at. The manager, a guy named Tony, was short-staffed and didn't ask many questions. He hired me to wash dishes for minimum wage, $6 an hour back then. It wasn't much, but it was something. I worked doubles whenever I could, scrubbing plates and pots until my hands were raw. I found a room to rent after a couple weeks. It was a tiny space in a rundown building, shared bathroom down the hall, but it was cheap. I didn't care about the roaches or the noisy neighbors, I just needed a place to sleep. Between the job and the rent, I started saving a little. Not a lot, maybe $20 a week after food and bus fare, but it added up. I bought a used calculator from a thrift store and started tracking every penny. Numbers made sense to me, more than people did. After a year at the diner, Tony saw I was reliable and moved me up to waiting tables. The tips were better, and I got good at remembering orders without writing them down. I didn't talk much to the customers, just did the job. Some of the regulars started recognizing me, leaving an extra $1 or $2. I kept saving, thinking maybe I could do more than sling hash browns forever. I didn't know what yet, but I wasn't going to stay stuck. Waiting tables paid better than washing dishes, but it still wasn't enough to get ahead. I'd been at the diner for 2 years, and my savings were up to a couple $100. I kept it in a coffee can under my bed, didn't trust banks back then. I knew I needed more than tips to change things, so I started looking for something else. One of the cooks at the diner, a guy named Raul, told me about a community college nearby. He said they had night classes, cheap ones, and you didn't need much to get in. I went down there one afternoon after my shift. The campus was small, just a few buildings with chipped paint and cracked sidewalks. I didn't have a high school diploma, just a letter from St. Mary's, but the lady at the admissions desk said it'd work. I signed up for a basic math class and one on bookkeeping. It cost most of my savings, but I figured it was worth it. Classes were 3 nights a week, and I'd go straight from the diner, still smelling like fryer grease. The math class was easy, I'd always been good with numbers. Bookkeeping was harder, but I liked it. It was all about keeping track of money, making sure everything added up. The teacher, Mrs. Larson, was strict but fair. She'd call me out if I messed up a ledger, but she also said I had a knack for it. I started doing extra problems from the textbook, staying up late in my room with a lamp I'd found on the curb. It felt good to be good at something. After a semester, I got a certificate in bookkeeping. It wasn't a degree, but it was enough to start applying for office jobs. I landed one at a small hardware store downtown. The owner, Mr. Patel, needed someone to handle inventory and payroll. It paid $12 an hour, double what I made at the diner. I quit waiting tables and started there full-time. The work was quiet, just me and a computer in a back room, entering numbers and checking stock. I liked the routine. I kept taking classes when I could afford it, picking up more skills. A year later, I got a better job at an accounting firm, doing data entry for $16 an hour. The firm was bigger, with cubicles and fluorescent lights that hummed all day. I didn't talk to my coworkers much, just kept my head down and worked. They didn't know where I'd come from, and I didn't tell them. By then, I'd saved enough to move out of the roach-infested room and into a small studio apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I'd been at the accounting firm for 3 years when it happened. I was 25, living in that studio apartment, and doing okay for myself. My job had turned into something steady. Data entry turned into junior accountant after I passed a couple certification exams. I made decent money, enough to buy a used car and put some away in a savings account. I didn't think about Mom or Jake much anymore. They were part of a past I'd left behind, or so I thought. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was driving back from the grocery store. Traffic was slow downtown, and I was stopped at a light near the shopping district. That's when I saw him. Jake was in the car next to me, behind the wheel of a black SUV, shiny, expensive, the kind of thing you don't see in our old neighborhood. He had sunglasses on, his hair slicked back, and he was tapping the steering wheel to some beat I couldn't hear. He looked different, older, but I knew it was him. Same jawline, same way he tilted his head. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to honk, roll down the window, say something. But I didn't. I just watched him. He didn't look my way, not once. The light turned green, and he sped off, weaving through traffic like he owned the road. I sat there until the car behind me honked, then drove home. My hands were shaking when I parked. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, and he didn't even know I was there. Later, I looked him up online. Took me a while to find him, his name's common enough, but I tracked down a social media profile that matched. He was living a couple hours away, working some sales job for a car dealership. The SUV made sense now. His posts were full of pictures, him at bars, him with a girlfriend, him standing next to fancy cars. No mention of Mom or Rick. No mention of me, obviously. He built a life, and I wasn't in it. I didn't message him. Didn't see the point. He hadn't recognized me, hadn't even glanced over. Maybe he wouldn't have cared if he did. I closed my laptop and went back to my routine: work, groceries, sleep. Seeing him didn't change anything, not really. But it stuck with me, that image of him driving away, oblivious to the brother he'd left behind. After seeing Jake that day, I kept going with my life. I didn't try to reach out to him or dig any deeper into what he was up to. It wasn't worth it. I'd spent years building something for myself, and I wasn't about to let a 5-second glimpse of him throw me off. Work stayed steady. I got another promotion at the accounting firm, moved into a senior role with my own office. The pay was good, enough to buy a small house on the edge of the city. It's nothing flashy, just a 1-story place with a decent roof and no leaks. That's all I need. I don't hear from Mom, and I don't expect to. Last I knew, she was with Rick, but that was years ago. She could still be with him, or maybe she's not, I don't check. She made her choice back then, and I made mine. I don't hate her for it anymore. I used to, when I was a kid at St. Mary's, lying awake wondering why she picked Jake over me. But now it's just a fact, like the weather or the date. It happened, and I moved on. Jake's out there somewhere, living his life. That SUV and his social media posts tell me he's doing fine, at least on the outside. I don't know if he ever thinks about me, or if he even remembers we were brothers once. I don't lose sleep over it. I've got my own stuff going on, work, a couple friends from the firm I grab beers with sometimes, a routine that keeps me grounded. I'm not rich or famous, but I'm not broke or lost either. That's more than I could have said 15 years ago. Looking back, I guess I turned out okay despite everything. Dad disappearing, Mom ditching me, Jake moving on, it all could have broken me, but it didn't. St. Mary's gave me a start, the diner gave me a lifeline, and those night classes gave me a way up. I put in the work, and it paid off. Not in some big, dramatic way, just a quiet, steady life I can call my own. I don't need anyone's approval for that, Not Mom's, not Jake's, not anyone's. Sometimes I drive by that intersection where I saw Jake, and I wonder what I'd do if I saw him again. Probably nothing. I'd keep going, same as always. That's who I am now, a guy who keeps going, no matter what got left behind.